Hello, my name is Alex from Swoosh English, and today I'll be focusing on one of the OET blog articles that I've put together. It is called Reading for Speed, Tips for Approaching Reading Part A. In this lesson, I'll focus on strategies related to reading Section A of the OET exam. Now, reading at speed is a tricky skill for both native and non-native English readers alike. So could there be anything more anxiety-inducing than the prospect of having to read 4 texts and answer 20 questions, all in the space of just 15 minutes? It's a real challenge, no doubt. So I thought you might appreciate some tips which you can use to help make that process a little bit more manageable. So here's the first tip. Begin with a skim. Now, one of the most common questions I get as an OET teacher is, where should I start? With the texts or the questions? My answer is always the same. Start with the texts, but don't read them in detail because you don't know which details you need yet. So just skim them. Read the headings, read the first lines of each paragraph, but quickly, very quickly. You just want to get a general idea of what general information questions will One of the most common questions I get as an OET teacher is, where should I start? With the texts or the questions? My answer is always the same. Start with the texts, but don't read them in detail because you don't know which details you need yet. So just skim them, read the headings, read the first lines of each paragraph, as you can see in the picture there, but very quickly. You just want to get a general idea of what each text is about. This is important because the first 7 questions of Part A will always ask you general information questions, which will test your general understanding of the texts. As a result, you should be able to answer most of them from your initial skimming. If you have to go back to the text to check some of the questions, that's okay. But it's general understanding you're going for here, not detail or specific information. The question you're asking yourself is, which text is focused on definitions? Which text is focused on procedure? Which text is focused on medication? And so on. Not what specific phrase was used in the 5th paragraph of text D. Save those sorts of questions for later. And later will come, because tip 2 is to let your previous reading guide you forward. So once you've completed questions 1 to 7, you should have a good general idea of what each of the texts is focused on. As a result, when answering questions 8 to 20, you should feel confident about knowing exactly which text to go to in order to find the answers. This is because questions 8 to 20 will always focus on specific information within the text. So if you've identified that text A focuses on the general background and definitions related to a condition, then a question such as falling on an outstretched hand is a typical cause of blank of the elbow would clearly be answered by finding a specific word or phrase from that text. Whereas if you've identified that text C focuses on medication, then the question, what analgesic should be used to give to a patient who is allergic to morphine, would therefore demand an answer from text C. The important thing here is that you waste as little time as possible looking for answers to questions 8 to 20 in the wrong texts. Time is short, so you must use it well. Tip 3, write exactly what you read. So as you can see here, always check for spelling errors. Unlike the listening exam, in reading Part A, you're expected to produce exact spelling. Any errors will cost you marks. So make sure that you write exactly what you read in the texts. There's no need to paraphrase or change the words in the text in any way when you write your answers to the questions, although the words around the questions will be paraphrased. As stated above, questions 8 to 20 will all focus on specific words and phrases from the text. So, it might be helpful to underline them when you find them to ensure that you are copying the relevant words correctly. Don't spend too much time doing this though. Remember the time limit. Tip number 4, be prepared to skip a question. Imagine you've answered the first 10 questions. You have around 7 minutes remaining and you just can't locate the answer to question 11. What should you do? Answer move on to the next question. You simply do not have time to waste. On average, you have 45 seconds for each question. If you find you're spending over a minute on any one answer, you need to either produce your best guess or just forget it and move on. It is much better to miss one question than it is to miss 4 or 5 because you run out of time. And finally, tip 5, practice, practice, practice. Provide yourself with plenty of it. You can do this with a qualified OET teacher who will be able to monitor your progress and give you feedback on areas of strength and weakness. You can also do this on your own using mock exams and medical and non-medical literature more generally. Training yourself to read and answer questions under strict timed conditions will help you to prepare both practically and mentally when it comes to OET reading, Part A. So as a summary, remember, begin with a skim, get the general idea of the texts first, and then once you've got your general idea, it'll be much easier to answer the next set of questions, 8 to 20, letting your previous reading guide you forward so you know which text to look at to find the answers to the specific information questions. Check your answers carefully. Think about underlining words in the text to make sure that you're spelling them correctly when it comes to writing the answers. Don't be afraid to skip an answer if you're spending too long on a question. Then you're taking away the opportunity from answering other questions. And finally, before you get into that exam room, the more practice you do, the more prepared you're going to be when it actually comes to doing reading Part A.